A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our case this week is an example of what happens when you are rich, going through a nasty divorce, and want revenge in the worst way possible. A divorce that included 2 failed hits on the wife, a case that required the FBI to get involved. And despite police intervention, someone did die. Police say the husband took his own life before the FBI raided his $7 million waterfront mansion in South Florida. So sadly, in the end, the husband lost everything. And as a result of his death, the wife, remember, she's still married to him, now assumes control of his lucrative construction company. She's technically the widow here. We're recording this on Wednesday, July 24th of 2024. Our guest today is Gerald Griggs, a criminal defense attorney, a civil rights attorney, a dear friend of the show who is joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. And Gerald, of course, we need to wish you congratulations. You are very kind to join us while on paternity leave. You have a precious baby boy who has joined your family, and he's just beautiful.
Well, thank you, Anna. It's always a pleasure to be here. And yes, he's in the other room trying not to make that gurgling noise, but he is a beautiful baby boy, and we're so excited to have him in our family.
What a blessing. May God and the angels protect him. Well, we go from something as joyous as bringing a baby into the world to something so horrific. I mean, we're talking here about what happens to a marriage when it completely unravels, and that is sad enough on its own. It impacts everyone in the family. It impacts businesses. But Gerald, this is so extreme, it's almost hard to believe it's true.
It's absolutely hard to believe that a marriage can unravel in such a horrific and jealousy impacted way. And so, I'm ready to jump into the story and encourage your listeners to pay attention.
Yes, because this is what happens when things get out of control. So this case is out of Coral Gables, Florida. Again, so outrageous, we can hardly believe the details here. It is, honestly, if you had 2 movies, it's like Scarface meets War of the Roses, and it doesn't end well for anyone in this case. The 2 people involved, the married couple here, Sergio and Tatiana Pino, were in the middle of this horrendous divorce. Now, the kind of divorce where the phrase, if just used, in just one of those fits of anger, I'm going to kill you. In this case, according to the FBI, that expression is actually a threat, not just a phrase that was shot out in haste. So that's very frightening. Frightening. 67-year-old Sergio Pino allegedly hired multiple murder crews with orders to kill his wife, 57-year-old Tatiana. The fact that Sergio had moved on, had a girlfriend, apparently that was just not enough to distract him from his revenge. So let's talk a little bit about the assets here, because that's really it was a fight over money, but you know what? As you've seen, Gerald, it's about getting back at someone when you're really mad at them.
Absolutely. And like it's always said, it's a thin line between love and hate. And revenge is just a horrible expression, a horrible emotion, and it leads to horrible things. And so for Sergio to hire multiple hit teams, multiple murder crews to kill his wife shows the extent that he was going to go to get his revenge.
9 people have been arrested in connection with those attempted hits. 9 people. That's a big operation.
I mean, that's a huge operation, and it would cost him a huge amount of money. But clearly, he was focused on getting his revenge. He was focused on sending a message. He was focused on killing his wife.
So Sergio Pino was a famous Miami developer, a Cuban immigrant who owned the Century Home Builders Group. It is the largest Hispanic-owned construction company in the country. He built an empire out of commercial and residential real estate. Now, here's the thing. He was worth anywhere between $150 million to $360 million. Court records are very interesting. According to the Miami Herald, the wife's side was saying, you're worth at least 360. And he's like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm worth closer to 150. Obviously, going through a divorce when you're going to have to divvy stuff up. As far as he was concerned, he wanted to be as poor as possible, but still like crazy rich.
Still crazy rich. And of course, in any state, especially community property states, you have to split it up half. So of course, he would fudge his accounting records to make him seem as poor as possible. And of course, poor in the pejorative sense, considering that between $300 to $100 million, that's an obscene amount of money for anybody. So, that's what he was trying to do.
And, he was also on the board of directors of several organizations. He had raised millions for charity. So this man, Sergio, and his wife, Tatiana, they were a very prominent couple in South Florida, very well known. So Sergio and Tatiana had been married for 30 years. I mean, that's a long relationship. And that's during the time when the business was built. Together, they have 2 adult daughters, and then Sergio had 2 children from a previous marriage, according to the Miami Herald. So authorities claim that Sergio tried, over a course of 2 years, to kill Tatiana several ways. Between trying to poison her with fentanyl, according to the FBI, between trying to set vehicles on fire. There was arson. There was a truck that tried to ram her, and then finally the attempted shooting. This over the course of 2 years. Here is U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Mackenzie LaPointe.
This case is about a husband, Mr. Pino, who decided after years of marriage that he was going to kill his wife. He had the means, the opportunity, and the willingness to have his wife killed. And he tried to have her killed on separate occasions. First, he tried to poison her over a period of time. When that failed, he put out a contract on her head on 2 separate occasions, hiring separate groups of hitmen to do the job. When the FBI closed in on him, he apparently, and of course tragically, committed suicide rather than face justice.
I think what is incredibly tragic here is that a life has been lost here. No matter what you may think of the situation, to take one's life is a very serious matter. And there are 4 children without a father now. And I ask, if all of this is true, all these attempts, this planning for years to kill your estranged wife, and this is how it ends?
Very tragic. And the thing that we have to keep in mind is that with each attempt and each failure, it appeared that he grew more and more focused on his end goal, if it's true. And our heart and prayer go out to his family. But also, it's a blessing that none of these attempts on her life were successful. So she obviously has some amount of guardian protection on the other side in the spirit world, because otherwise it only typically takes one time for somebody to try to kill you to be successful. But to try over and over and over again, she was very blessed.
She was. It is shocking, especially on the last attempt when we talk about that, when, there was a gun pointed at her, and then when her daughter ran out, the gun was pointed at the daughter. It is a miracle that nobody else got killed that day when they went to shoot her and kill her. It's just incredible. So the first attempt at killing her, according to the authorities, would have been around 2022 in February or earlier that year. Supposedly, she had been poisoned with fentanyl, had to be hospitalized, had to be intubated, and that was the first attempt. According to court records, remember, he hired 9 people, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and of those 9 people, some of them worked for him, like someone who helped him with his yacht, which if you look at pictures of his waterfront mansion and the day that the raid happened, there's a giant yacht parked, at his dock. So apparently now remember, these people have been charged, but they are innocent, believed innocent until proven guilty. But the allegation is that someone on the yacht may have helped with the fentanyl, someone who may have been a roofer for him may have helped with the shootout. I mean, and to think, at what point, Gerald, when you involve this many people, and we're not talking about professional hitmen here, maybe some professional criminals, because some of them, had met in prison. At what point do you think that this is going to remain a secret?
I mean, anytime you want a secret to get out, tell somebody else. And so to involve 9 other people, many of them, yes, career criminals, but clearly not career hitmen, you're going to have issues. And I mean, be hiring your yacht guy and your roofer to take out your wife, and then to use fentanyl, which anybody who knows anything about fentanyl, you could OD on just touching the fentanyl. So, it's not the smartest moves to hire people that close to you who are not, trained in this type of work. And then also it will, not help you in court if he had made it to court, because most of the time those people will flip on you because they're facing such substantial amounts of prison time. So wasn't the brightest ideas to use, your staff to try to take out your wife?
And for someone as accomplished as this man, right? Incredibly successful, clearly smart, clearly has access to a lot of things. I just don't think he was thinking clearly, because none of this is a good idea. None of it.
No, it's not a good idea. But the one thing that, they don't really advertise a lot is where to hire a hitman. So I think that, for the most part, he was reaching to the people closest to him. But again, it was not the brightest idea, and which is probably part of the reason why he took the other road out, because he saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, it was definitely a fairly strong case against him. And I presume had he been convicted, he would have been spending a very long time in prison. So, the whole thing, over money, and then the way it ends. Okay, so the fentanyl poisoning fails. That's in 2022. So in April of that year, Tatiana files for divorce. Sergio offers her $20 million as a settlement. Tatiana says no. Remember, that is something like 5% of what they are worth. Whether it's 150, 360, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So they were married for 30 years. She's entitled to, probably half of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not even a good opening salvo. I mean, if they've been married for 30 years, you would think you'd open up, somewhere for $1 million a year during that. If that's at the low end, definitely, you should offer 30 to 40% or even half if you're really trying to resolve this. And then the ultimate issue is whether or not he's worth 150 million or 300 million.
Correct. And that, and what's interesting is that some of these hits took place on days when either she was coming back from divorce court or before there was a hearing coming up. So, even the timing of it makes it even more suspicious. Okay, so according to police, Sergio, he recruits his people. We've now got 9 people who have been charged in this murder for hire plot, and the person leading it, according to authorities, would have been Sergio Pino. Let's divide up the crews, because what this will show you is when the first series of attempts don't work and the cops get involved, rather than pulling back, Sergio doubles down. And this is the part I just don't get, because as a move, it's a really dangerous one just for himself. There's no preservation of himself in this, right?
No, he's clearly escalating. He's clearly not being rational in that, he's going to be caught. He's clearly not exercising the best judgment and using individuals who are not professionals in this. And then ultimately escalating the conduct because he's desperate. Anytime you're doing this before or after court, there's emotion involved that's clouding your logic.
Oh, absolutely. So crew number 1, this would be the first series of attempts. 4 people were involved in crew number 1. This is, again, the alleged supply of the fentanyl for the alleged poisoning. Then there was an incident involving arson, where 3 cars belonging to Tatiana's sister were set on fire, and thank God nobody was killed there and the house was not burned down. Then, in August of 2023, this is when things start to erupt and turn. And the video, for those of you who are listening, we will be showing you this video because it is really unbelievable. According to the authorities, crew number 1 rents a Home Depot flatbed truck, not a small truck, and they try to ram, they actually do, they ram the wife's car. It's all caught on video, and it looks crazy. First of all, she survives. It doesn't even look like a properly thought out plan as to how they were going to do it.
Well, this is what happens when you hire contractors. They literally went to the local Home Depot and rented the $1999 truck where you have to give your license and all your contact information, drove it off of the Home Depot parking lot and tried to ram his wife in the car. What more do you get when you hire contractors who don't do this for a living?
And based on the video and where this occurred, I'm trying to figure out what exactly was the plan. Was it to crush her in her car? Because it's not like she was near a cliff or that she was going to be run off the road and then, down a hillside or anything. So it's really unclear to me what their plan was. Of course, it all gets caught on video and they all get arrested. Okay? So help me with this one, Gerald. They get arrested on the spot. Obviously, they find people, these 4 people in crew number 1 who are accused here. The authorities said at the news conference it was at this point in which the FBI, the federal authorities, state authorities, local authorities start a serious investigation into the possibility that her husband, right, her estranged husband, is behind all of this, right? So his investigation starts in earnest, and he knows this. He knows it. And he hires 5 other people to come up with a new plan. Wouldn't you just back down at this point and say, oh, these people are nuts. They don't know what they're saying. I would never do such a thing.
Or you would hire an attorney who would tell you, first and foremost, hopefully you're not engaged in any of this. But if you are, you should stop because I can't represent you during the ongoing planning of a criminal attempt to kill somebody. But more importantly, you should be worried about those 4 other people telling on you and testifying against you. Meanwhile, you bring 5 more individuals into the conversation with more incriminating information. But one of the biggest issues is if there's an active investigation and you believe that he may be in a conspiracy to kill his wife, did you let his wife know? Because at this point, the authorities have now placed her in jeopardy because they didn't notify her that, hey, by the way, your husband may be trying to kill you.
Right. There's a big time gap. It's between August of 2023, when the rented truck rams her, until the next series of attempts this summer. So that's a pretty long period of time. So it's unclear to me whether the authorities really did take it as seriously, or it was this last one, the shootout, where there was like, that's it, we're going in. It's looking to me like it was the shootout, not the, I would think this was a big enough case. If you live in the Miami area, right, and the wife of one of your most prominent home builders, one of your richest people in Miami, just had an attempt on her life, I would think the authorities would notice, especially if they're going through a contentious divorce.
Absolutely. That'd be the first thing you would notice. I mean, he tried to kill her allegedly with an overdose of fentanyl. So she was in the hospital incubated. So at that point, bells and whistles should go off. But if it didn't, then the next attempt with the car from Home Depot should definitely ring some bells and some alarms. And it should stop then by them offering her protection or telling her that she needs to get some protection or something like that. But to continue on until there's actual shootout, I guess they were afraid now it's going to affect the rest of the public, and so we need to get involved.
Yeah, I am a little concerned. I feel like there could have been more intervention here, especially with the fact that this happened over 2 years, right? 2 years. All right, so after those four get arrested, then we know that Pino is aware he's under surveillance or something, right? I mean, the cops have got to question him. So this is when the FBI says he hired crew number 2, and this one was made up of 5 people. Now, in this group, according to the FBI, Pino allegedly did things differently. He offered them $150,000 up front to shoot Tatiana, and then an extra $150,000 if they kept Sergio's name out of it.
Why would he need to pay them to keep his name out of it unless he was expecting them to get caught? And, typically you do, allegedly, from what I've heard on movies, you do pay up front. But $150,000 to 5 people to kill your wife, it's not the best investment. I don't think it costs that much, allegedly, to, have a hit on somebody. So he's not being smart with his money. He's definitely expecting that these people are going to tell. So maybe that's why he added some more money on there. But a typical murder case is going to run you 50 to 100,000 anyway as to defend the case. So, I mean, basically they're only getting between 100 to 50,000, somewhere around in there. So, yeah, this is not well thought out at all.
Absolutely not. Okay, so apparently in this crew, it's supposedly a roofer that worked for him, according to authorities. Now they go to Tatiana's house to kill her because the new plan is she must be shot because the other attempts...
Other attempts didn't work.
Didn't work, so we have a new plan in place. And this would be June 23rd. This is last month. Now, at this point, authorities cannot look away. So Tatiana is pulling into her driveway and she sees a man pointing a gun at her. I'm surprised this woman didn't have security with her because, I mean, they have a lot of money. She should have had bodyguards with her, and every kid should have had a bodyguard at this point. So she's pulling in. She says she sees a man with a gun, and so what she does is, because she's not going to get out of her car now, she's honking her horn in the sense like she's not letting her hand off of the horn. So really to make a racket. And then she is driving to get away, and she's driving in an erratic manner, right? Because she doesn't have a lot of wiggle room, so she hits a tree, she hits a fence, and the whole time she's got her hand on the horn of the car. Meanwhile, her daughter is inside the house. The daughter comes out, sees mom acting erratically, and then the guy, according to the daughter, she says the gun now is pointed at her, and the guy tells her to get back in the house. So how frightening is this? And just in case you didn't believe that dad was trying to kill mom, I would think this moment would solidify it for the kids, right?
Absolutely. You saw the gun. You saw the gunman. You saw your mom driving erratically. And I have some questions about why she was driving erratically. She should just put it in reverse or put it in drive and hit the guy. Either one of those would have worked out. But all of this is crazy. And again, at that point, well, hopefully the kids knew before. But at that point, the kids have, concrete evidence that there is a plot to kill their mother.
So she calls 911, the daughter does, and we're going to play it for you. This is the Pino's daughter, Alessandra, and we got the 911 call from the Miami Herald.
There's a gun. There's a guy with a gun.
What do you mean? There's a guy with a gun?
Yes, he just pointed a gun at me, and they're still here.
Okay.
Please, are they almost here?
Yes, ma'am. We're sending officers on the way now. Okay.
The daughter sounds absolutely frantic and scared. I mean, who wouldn't be? You've just seen this, something you can't even process. People with guns, your mother running away from gunmen, then the gun is turned on you, you know.
And this is all happening right outside your home. And
Yes.
so, I mean, you can't become any more frantic than this is happening right outside a place that I feel is safe. And I'm seeing the person, one of the people that brought me into this world, panicked and running for her life with her hand on the horn. All kinds of emotions would be going through your head at that point. You can definitely tell it from the sound of her voice.
So between her call to 911, the neighbors also called. I read that one of the neighbors, when he heard the commotion and he could hear the honking, you know, again, very South Florida life, gets in his golf cart, drives over to the neighbor. Obviously, he's trying to get there as quickly as possible, and he's trying to help. You know, by the time he got there, he could see the hitman taking off. But yeah. I thought that was such a Florida moment. The neighbor comes over in the golf cart to see what's going on.
Yeah, that's definitely South Florida. Only thing missing would be, you know, the gator chasing behind him as he's driving the golf cart to go to see what's happening next door.
That's why I say, and I said it at the top of the podcast, it is almost impossible for me to believe that all of this is true, yet it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a movie. Like you said, it's a mixture of Scarface and War of the Roses. I would add that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie movie as well.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith?
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, yeah.
Or their real life, I mean.
Well, yeah, that too. But, you know, because this is something you don't imagine you would see in reality. You'd see this on the big screen or on a Tubi movie or something like that, but not in real life.
Wow, just the most extraordinary thing. So, after this event, okay, this is a monumental event now. If the authorities didn't investigate this or take it seriously a year earlier, you cannot look away from this one, right? And so on July 16th, this is, you know, just like 2 weeks after, on July 16th, and Sergio and his attorney knew that the authorities wanted to talk to him. The attorney told several news agencies that he had made his client available, that his client was willing to come in. The authorities made the decision that they were sending the SWAT team in, and they were going to get him, and they were going to search the house. So the attorney said it didn't have to happen this way, that his client would not have taken his life had he been permitted to turn himself in. I cannot know the answer to that. What is your experience when you have a situation, I mean, and this one is particularly high profile, when your client, the authorities, want your client for attempted murder, you're trying to negotiate the terms of him at least coming in or turning himself in?
Typically, even on the most highest of profile cases, they give you some time to turn your client in, or they just tell you to meet them at the jail and you turn them in. So it's something smells about that logic. And again, I don't tend to question other members of the bar. Right. But if you are working on a turn in and they're saying it's urgent, then you need to get your client down to the jail. So I think that something needs to be added to that part of the story.
Yeah, I'm just revisiting the timeline here just to see how much there was. So the attempted murder shooting at Tatiana's house was June 23rd, last month. And then July 16th is when the FBI and SWAT teams go to his home in Coral Gables. There's definitely enough time there.
There's enough time. What probably happened was he was trying to make arrangements. The lawyer had been stringing it out, and the authorities grew weary of the attempts to delay. You know, typically on a case this high profile, they'll give you a week, especially if your client doesn't have any prior criminal history. They'll give you a week to turn him in. But this just smells a little bit like somebody trying to gaslight and the reason why he didn't turn himself in.
So back to July 16th, because this is truly a tragic day. The FBI and the SWAT team arrive at the house early in the morning. They go through all their procedures, banging on the door, the bullhorn come out, the flashbang, everything. You go through all the protocol to get the person to give himself up, to open the door, let them in. And everyone tried calling him. So the authorities are calling him. His attorney is there at the scene. He's calling him. His current girlfriend, Sergio's current girlfriend, calling. Kids are calling. Everyone is calling him on the phone, and he's not answering. He is not answering because he has killed himself. So by 10:19 of that morning, Sergio Pino is declared dead. And of course, the investigation continues. It's how on a criminal level, with the alleged leader of all of these multiple plots, these murder for hire plots, if that person no longer is there, what happens to these 9 people who have been charged? Because isn't it going to be a lot harder to prove that it was completely organized, or I don't know. I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, it is going to be a little harder for the prosecution to connect the dots, especially if none of the individuals are talking. But it does put them in a precarious situation as they're left holding the bag if they actually get convicted, because, the person that's most culpable is no longer there. And so you can't blame them anymore. You have to accept responsibility. So on both sides of it, it's going to be a difficult case, especially for the defendants, because now, if you can't show that you were less culpable because you're the one left, prosecution's not going to want to cut a deal.
And it's a complicated case.
Yes.
Because what is not clear to me based on the news conference is whether these 2 separate teams, these alleged teams, were working in concert or were working completely independently of each other.
Yeah, exactly. And the only person that would know that would be Sergio. And Sergio's no longer here to, even, bear out what was actually happening, what the plan actually was, whether or not the 2 teams were in coordination with one another. Given the lack of sophistication in all this, I doubt they were working together. But, you never will know that, and it's going to be hard to prove that in front of a jury.
I know that you are not a divorce attorney, but, when you think about justice and you think about karma, they were in the middle of this contentious divorce. But because he dies, takes his life, while he is still technically married to Tatiana, that kind of changes everything, doesn't it?
It does. Basically, she's the heir at this point. Of course, her children would have some claims to the money, but she becomes the sole heir apparent, and she gets all of the construction company, all of the assets, and all the things he was fighting to keep her from getting by trying to kill her. She ended up getting, and karma has a way of making things come full circle.
It's extraordinary. So, according to published reports, Tatiana has taken over the construction business. Sergio's brother is the administrator of his estate. It's going into probate. I have a feeling that whether there's a trust set up or if it's a will or whatever the situation is, this is going to be contentious. It's not like it ends here.
No, it doesn't end. It just shifts to another venue. So it goes from domestic relations or divorce court into the probate court. And I'm sure, given what Sergio was trying to accomplish, if he had any competent attorneys, of course, separate and apart from the criminal conspiracy, because hopefully none of the attorneys will be a part of that, they would have explained to him the best way to place his assets in a way that while he was divorcing, or if he had an untimely death, the wife couldn't touch him. So he might have put him in a trust. He might have, sold him to a straw person before he took his life. There's a lot of things that could have happened. So it's going to be interesting to watch from a legal perspective how that, plays out.
But just extraordinary that she ends up now running the company.
Absolutely.
I cannot wrap my head around this one, Gerald.
It was a lot. I think that it makes for a great plot to a movie. I think it'll probably be a blockbuster.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Can you imagine the first person to get the interview with Mrs. Pino? Oh, boy.
I'm sure they're lining up down there in South Florida because it's going to be must-see TV to find out what was going on in the inner circle that caused all of this. And then, of course, getting that interview with law enforcement, if they grant it, why'd you have all these red flags and you didn't do anything?
Yeah, and why didn't she have a bodyguard with her at every turn? I'm not saying a bodyguard could have completely prevented everything, but I think it's certainly, I would have upped my security. I would have done something.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have just been, waiting for the inevitable to happen, because clearly she had to know after the fentanyl, she had to have a clue that something was going on. And then after the Home Depot renter truck ran into her, you would definitely have red flags going off.
And her sister's car's on fire. I cannot believe this. All right. Well, Gerald, thank you so much for your insight in this one.
Thank you for having me.
It is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases that you all are talking about on social media. Here's our producer, Will Updike. Hey, Will, how are you?
Good. How's it going, Anna?
Good.
Gerald, good to see you.
It's good to see you, Will.
So this week we have a case of an alligator wrestler wrestling with the law. Just real quick, quick guess. This case involves a pet alligator. Where would the two of you say regionally, geographically, this case might be from?
Either Florida or South Carolina.
Anna?
I'm going to say South Florida.
New York State. This comes out of Hamburg, New York, which is just south of Buffalo there, where a man is now suing the New York Department of Environmental Conservation after government agents stormed his house, taking his pet alligator in March of this year. Now, the owner, Tony Cavallero, has been emotionally distraught since his pet alligator, who's named Albert, was confiscated. But Tony claims that the reptilian seizure was excessive as a matter of law, according to a new lawsuit. Now, Tony says that he's had a dangerous animal license that was in good standing for over 30 years. And at the time of the seizure, he'd been fighting with governmental bureaucracy for more than 4 years. So a little background on this, he got this alligator back in 1990. And he said, I purchased the alligator with the understanding that I would be able to keep it for the rest of its life by abiding by the then and there existing laws for relicensure. So he built a $120,000 enclosure for this alligator in his home. He loved Albert. He treated him like a part of the family. Reportedly, Albert was like a gentle giant. He would even swim with some of the family members. Don't know about that. That might be going a little far. But it seems dangerous to me, but I don't know Albert personally. But so Tony says that this dangerous animal license, it was renewed multiple times without incident in the 30 years, that he's had this pet. However, in 2020, the Department of Environmental Conservation changed the requirements for this possession of dangerous animals permit. Now, Tony claims he was compliant with this. He updated the enclosure and even sent proof that he had met all the requirements. But for months, he doesn't hear from the DEC. He claims that they ignored his message. And then they finally got back to him months later saying that the enclosure still needed to be updated. So he's trying to go back and forth now to get to the bottom of this, what the issue is, what's going on here. And he said that they just stonewalled him for the next 4 years. His quote was, "Nobody from the DEC returned any of my phone calls, despite the fact that their correspondents advised me to contact them if I had any questions regarding the new requirements." So, he went so far in this, he's so worried about this. He reached out to the state senator and tried to get them involved to just even get him in contact with someone from DEC. So it goes years without any reported correspondence, according to the lawsuit. And it isn't until after his house was raided in March, which he described as like a DEA drug bust on some sort of kingpin, like there's all these agents and stuff swarming the place. He said it wasn't until after that raid that they finally responded to his application by just outright rejecting it. So in this lawsuit, Tony is seeking for Albert to be returned. And for the DEC to approve his application. Now, a little note on Albert here. After he was seized, he was taken to Gator Country Adventure Park, which is in Beaumont, Texas. Tony, I said, has been very distraught. He's actually really concerned about Albert's well-being in this new environment. Reportedly, Tony's only gotten like photos and videos of Albert since he's been here. But Tony claims that Albert looks very distressed. He doesn't look happy. And he says he could tell by his actions. Albert is grateful that the alligator, is still alive and healthy. They didn't, euthanize Albert or anything terrible.
And who owns? Yeah. So part of this, I don't know, Gerald, but animals are usually considered property in most states. It's always, especially when you go to sue over things like, if you get a sick animal or you're sold a sick animal anyway, or something happens to them, they're considered property. So is the government allowed to take your property, your alligator, and ship it out of state? I get it. It's cold in upstate New York, but I don't know how I feel about all this.
The state does have the power to remove property if it's deemed a threat to public safety, but I don't think the state has the power to remove it out of the state. And so that would now involve the federal government at this point, because you have a citizen whose property has been taken across state lines, and there's still a question as to the legality of all of this. And of course, it sounds like Tony was trying to follow all of the rules to keep Albert, which again, that's questionable in itself, having a large alligator in New York. But nevertheless, but to remove it to Texas, and now you've involved a whole different government entity. There are a lot of questions that a lot of lawyers are going to have to ask about the legality of all this.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm torn about this case is, look, I understand an alligator is a dangerous animal. It certainly doesn't thrive in the cold weather like that. I get all those things. But based on what you've said, Will, Tony had permits, legally obtained, and had the animal for most of the animal's 30 years, for their 30-year relationship, and things just changed in the last 2. So and I'm sure he can, if what he's saying is true, and he can back it up, that there were multiple communications on his part and trying to do everything that was asked of him. That's why I'm just questioning this. It seems so extreme the way it's all turned out.
Yeah, I think the thing that really rubs me the wrong way too is that they just didn't even reject his application until after they had seized the animal. So I think it'd be one thing, because let's say there was just no way he could update the enclosure to their satisfied requirements. He could at least then be part of the solution for where the alligator would go, and he would have some say of, if it can't stay with him, where it can spend the rest of its life. And it just seems like, from what he's saying and from this lawsuit and from all that I could read, that wasn't the case. That there was just nothing until this happened. And also, it's been with him for 30 years. I'm sure the neighbors know about it. Clearly there's a lot of people who have known about this thing for decades. And it, seemingly hasn't really been a problem. And I was looking into it because it is technically illegal to have an alligator as a pet in the state of New York, but I think that you're covered if you have this dangerous animal licensure. So I don't really fully understand. I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't sit well with me, just the way that it all unfolded. Because it'd be one thing if he couldn't meet the requirements. That's understandable. If they were like, hey, I'm sorry, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And he's like, I'm, either
okay, I'll
monetarily I can't do it, or but to not be given that opportunity, I don't know, doesn't sit right with me.
And I don't like the fact that Albert has been sent to an amusement park or whatever that place is. No disrespect to the place, but it seems to me shouldn't he be in some kind of an alligator preserve at least until, as opposed to being subject to, a for-profit, if it is a for-profit organization. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like taking your animal, putting it in, no disrespect, a version of not a circus, but one of those places that you go.
Like a sideshow kind of.
Right. Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, Albert, shouldn't he at least just be in a preserve until this is all figured out?
And
some type of.
Like, why Texas?
First off, why Texas? But secondly, to be subjected to basically going to an animal amusement park, where people go visit and pay money, as opposed to, like you said, a reserve or preserve or some type of animal sanctuary that is closer to the state of New York. I mean, I know the climate in the Northeast is not.
Like, they can't even keep him on the East Coast?
Yeah, I mean, he could have maybe Virginia, Maryland, maybe. But I mean, at worst case scenario, South Carolina or Florida. But I mean, Texas, that's across the entire United States to the south. So, and I didn't even know Texas had alligators. But I thought maybe that's why I get alligators and crocodiles confused. But, it's a lot going on here that just does not seem legal. Yes, he probably didn't have the permit, but there seems to have been an exception, or he was trying to get it, or they hadn't rejected it. And so to take his animal without just compensation and move it across the country, there sounds like there's a cause of action there.
Yeah, so he's still waiting on a court date for this lawsuit. He says once that's settled, he wants to, at the very least, go visit Albert there in Texas. He hasn't gotten the opportunity to see him. Like I said, it's been since March. And the New York Post reached out to the DEC, who did not respond to a request for comment on this. So people were kind of split on this in the comments. Some people were with them, some people were not. Extra said, give the Florida man his pet back. Not a Florida man, but, I get the sentiment. And then, there's people who didn't agree with this, but I don't know if I quite identify with their reasoning. Kim V said, disgusting. People who keep animals in cages or captivity are sick and need help. That poor alligator didn't want to be alone in a cold, dark prison. What is wrong with people? I will say, I don't know that this was a cold, dark prison. We're talking about $120,000 enclosure here. I don't know. Again, it just does raise questions about, how in the first place was he able to legally obtain this alligator? I don't really know what went on there. But if he got these permits, I don't think it was, I don't think he pulled up to the back of the truck and got a baby alligator or something like that. It seems like it was legally obtained. Miss Love said, poor things need freedom, but he's been with him for 30 years. So that's not fair, which I kind of agree. And there's questions as to whether these things should be kept in captivity at all. But there are also statutes on if an animal that would be in the wild has lived domesticated for, I think it's 90 days or 60 days, it cannot be returned back to the wild because you can't be positive, A, that it would be able to survive, and B, it could have, picked up some sort of disease or something from being around humans that you wouldn't want it to introduce into the wild. So I don't know about that one. Cray V said, it's the plot to Lyle Crocodile, which I had forgotten about. A great children's book, but it is about a man who has a pet crocodile in New York City, and his neighbor, Mr. Grumpy, gets mad because Lyle reportedly scares his cat, and he has Lyle thrown in jail, I believe, in the Brooklyn Zoo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forgot about that book, but yeah.
I was glad to revisit it. And Susie wanted to know, his alligator is depressed. And I'll just show some pictures. If you're the listener and you can't see this right now, he's snuggling with the alligator. The alligator's playing with little stuffed animals. I got to be honest, I don't like reptiles at all. Snakes are the scariest thing in the world to me, and I'm not a fan of anything that slithers or scales. But it seems like a good relationship. I mean, it seems like a good pet.
Well, yeah. I mean, a relationship, and I think he did try to take care of him, whether it's right, whether it's morally right, that's for everyone to have a discussion about. This does remind me of a situation, and I'm sure, Gerald, you have found yourself in the same situation with some of your older children. So when my son was something like, 10 or 12, he really wanted a hedgehog, and they are super cute. But, hedgehogs are illegal in the state of California. And so I kept trying to explain to him. We were in Colorado and we were at a pet shop. And of course, he's playing with the hedgehog and he wants me to bring the hedgehog home. And here I am as a crime investigator trying to explain to him it's illegal in the state of California. And even if nothing happens to us, I said, what happens if the hedgehog gets sick? Where can I take the hedgehog to get medical treatment? Because right? What vet is going to take an illegal animal, which starts a whole thing, and then they're going to confiscate the head? So it was like I had my own potential Albert situation, but on a much tinier scale of animal. So no hedgehog.
Less likely to eat you.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems a little safer.
I've always felt really bad about it. Like I to this day, I still send my son pictures of hedgehogs because I feel so bad. I had to tell him, no, you can't have a hedgehog. It's the law.
You should have just bought him Sonic the Hedgehog and he would have been fine.
I don't know. Well, thanks, Will. It was such a pleasure. Love that case. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Will.
See you all later.
I do have a comment that I want to share. You all know that I try to read your comments and have a conversation with you on YouTube. I can't get to everyone's comment, but I love the fact that you all voice your opinions and we have a broader discussion about the cases we discuss here on the podcast. And so in last week's podcast, McCookie Party, that's their handle on YouTube, said, Anna, I've missed listening to your podcast, so I got up early today to get ready for work and catch up on some TCD. Have a great weekend, sugar. I just thought that was so nice.
That was absolutely nice. And I do read the comments as well and try to interact. And the listeners and the viewers are just so awesome. Thank you for all of the love over the years I've been on here. It means a lot. So thank you to the show and thank you to them because they are a delight.
We have the nicest crime community. We really do. Just wonderful and engaging. And you all think of things that I never occurred to me, or you have facts that you bring to the conversation. I love it. It's my favorite part of what I do. So Gerald, where can people follow you and find you on social media?
You can follow me on all social media channels at Attorney Griggs, ATTORNEY GRIGGS. And I've started my own YouTube. So please go to my YouTube. It's at Attorney Griggs, the Justice Fighter on YouTube. And I'd love to have you guys. We talk about all things justice and the law and social justice. So just appreciative of having the platform and would love for you guys to join us.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to look for that. Congratulations on that. That's wonderful. And congratulations again on the baby, on the sweet little angel. You can find me at Anna G News on all social media platforms. And you can find everything that we do here at True Crime News at My True Crime News. So it's really easy to find us. You can find this episode, all our episodes, wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which has more than 5 million subscribers. And you can sign up to receive our newsletter at truecrimenews.com. So until next week, I'm Ana Garcia. This is True Crime News, the podcast. And as we always say, don't do crime.